in it? Well, you know what they say, it's always hot when you're close to the equator. Hey guys, Vince here from AutoIndustriya, and what we have here for you is the new generation Ford Territory, one of the most important models in the Ford Philippine lineup, because since they launched the Territory nameplate here, it garnered like 20,000 sales in, I don't know, less than 3 years. So that's how good it was for Ford Philippines, and that's why they pushed to bring you the new generation model as soon as possible. And make no mistake about it, this is a new generation model. But first, over in China, well, it's not known as Territory, at least not this body anyway, because they're actually selling the older Territory still in China, and they're also selling this as the Equator Sport side by side. If anything, it's actually a different vehicle overall. Over in China, they did come up with an Equator and Equator Sport, basically same thing as Montero Sport. You have the bigger version, the Equator. You have the Equator Sport, the smaller version. This one seems a lot bigger, even though on paper it doesn't seem to be that much bigger. So it gives you that impression of size, but it also gives you an impression of style. What do you think about the look of this? Because they've got an entirely new design on the vehicle. You can see it with the front end, you can see it with the grille, the headlights, the position lamps right here. Actually, these are the headlights down there. What we have here is the titanium variant. There are two variants launched by Ford. One is a Titanium X, and this one is the lower grade version. Now, a lot of you guys are also saying in the comments that, hey, the Titanium X is so much more expensive. Well, this one is a more affordable option. And Ford achieved that by making a few, let's say, key deletions. For example, if you look in the front, you see that little rectangle under the plate? That is no longer a sensor, that's just basically a blank. That's for the radar cruise control or the adaptive cruise control. It's not present in this vehicle along with a few other features inside. We'll show you in a bit. Wheels are a little bit smaller, but perhaps the key difference here is the roof. It no longer has the panoramic glass roof. Now from the side, you can see what I mean about the size of the vehicle. It is longer by about 50 millimeters. The height has also been elevated with the roof, but also they lifted up the whole vehicle by about 10 millimeters compared to before. So you have a bit more ground clearance. I think this one has 190. So that's good for our kind of driving. But in terms of style, I mean, check out what they did with the color, the silver, the chrome. I mean, not a fan of chrome, but for some reason, I think it kind of works in the Territory. It even has those silver roof rails up top. But yeah, it has the side mirrors mounted right here on the door. By the way, this one does have a 360 camera, which is why you have a camera right here. Has the repeaters as well, chrome then, silver trim here. The doors are clamshell style, so you don't get the sill there like with many other models. So which is nice, by the way. It's kind of roomy inside. We'll show you in a bit. But really, I like the character lines. The wheels, even though it's a little bit smaller, it does look good with this vehicle. So yeah, overall, oh, one more thing. It's nice what Ford did with this, with a D pillar right here, because before they had this thing that, I don't know, it kind of went down and then something like that. So this one, more conventional, and you have a nice window here, but this is not a 3-row version. That would be the Equator. Like I said with the walk around of the Titanium X, the Territory does give the impression of width, and you can see it with the back. Look at how far the taillights are apart. Look at how wide the glass area is compared to before, because with the previous Territory, they kind of tapered it like that. So it kind of takes a bit of space from the inside. Very little bit, but you can notice it. But taillights look nice, has Territory neatly spelled out there. You also have EcoBoost here, the usual titanium there. You have the lower bumper there. But what I like is that Ford resisted the urge to put in fake tailpipes, you know, like the Lazada Racing Special. It just gives it a nice, clean look overall, nothing really fake under there. But when you open up the tailgate, let's see right here, it doesn't have the power tailgate, so liftgate, it's okay. I mean, it does lift up nicely with the dampers. But I do have the rear seats folded down to give you maximum space. In this configuration, it's about 61 inches long from here up to the edge of the seat. It's about 32 inches long from here to there, then at the shortest points. It's also about 58 inches wide here. When I did the walk around of the Titanium X variant, it had a tonneau cover right here. For this one, it's deleted, which is kind of weird. That's a weird and rather cheap part to omit from a vehicle because it is kind of useful, especially if you want to keep your stuff away from prying eyes. Now let's check underneath the hood. Powering the new generation Ford Territory is actually an evolved version of the engine found from the previous one. This one is still a 1.5 liter turbo intercooler, turbo in the back, intake in front, and then you have the intercooler down here. It's a gasoline engine with an air-to-air intercooler right there, but it also makes 10%, pretty much, 10% more power, 10% more torque. So this one has around 160 horsepower. It's a big improvement from before. Believe you me, when you drive it, it actually feels very different. The engine bay is quite neat, even though they didn't try to cover that much up with plastic. And also something to note about the plastic is that I'm getting some hard water stains that we can't get off even with our cleaner. So keep that in mind. But what's interesting about this Territory is the transmission. Now on the brochure, it says 7-speed automatic, but it's not really an automatic in the classic sense like you would find in most other cars. This is a dual clutch transmission. Now me, I'm allergic to kiwi fruit. Ford is allergic to the term dual clutch transmission, especially after the power shift experience from many years before with the Focus, with the EcoSport, with the Fiesta, and a few others abroad. There were problems with the reliability of the vehicle, the jerkiness in traffic, but that's not something we're experiencing with this vehicle so far. In my time with it in the last few days, it's actually been fairly smooth, and that's a good thing. The reason for that is that this is a wet type dual clutch transmission. Now, I've been trying to read up on the dual clutch transmission in this vehicle because before the power shift was made by Getrag. This one, I have a feeling it's made by Magna, and Magna is basically also Getrag. So hopefully they have applied the learnings they've had from the power shift into this new wet type dual clutch, and hopefully there's an improvement in the long run. But first, we gotta drive it. But before that, let's take a look inside. If you happen to be sitting in the back of the Territory, it's actually a nice place to be because you got a lot of room, you have a great seat, you have a great view out in front. You don't have a panoramic glass roof, but you do have a great view out in front because the front seat doesn't occupy too much of your field of vision. You have a seat back pocket, 2 AC vents, 1 charging port, armrest, 2 cup holders, 3-point seat belts all around, adjustable headrest, grab handle here, light down up there. You also have a nice door handle over here. Even the pocket here for your grab handles for the door, it actually doubles as a phone pocket, even fits mine very nicely like that. But one thing I really like is the floor of the Territory at the back because it's flat like an EV. Let me make this very clear now. I'm really loving the interior of this new Territory. I like the details that they chose. I like the overall look, the color scheme, the features, the ergonomics, this screen thing here. A lot of the things here I really, really like, and only very few that I can really nitpick on. Now, the first thing that gets you is the design of the interior, the dashboard. Because you look at it, you have this one long housing here that has 2 screens. One is for your driver display, like where your gauges would normally be. So you have tachometer here on the left, it goes up like that. You have speedometer on the right, goes up like that. Similar to the Peugeots that we've experienced. You have your temperature here, fuel meter right there. You have the tire pressure monitoring. You have this basically is a multi-info display here in the middle. Here in the middle, you have the multimedia system, which right now, as you can see, I have my Android Auto hooked up. And by the way, even though this is a lower grade variant, it's the wireless Android Auto and wireless Apple CarPlay. They didn't reduce that feature for this variant. And what I like is that when you go from, let's say, you go to the Spotify, right, and then you want to go back to the map, it kind of gives you both, which is kind of cool. I haven't seen that with a lot of other vehicles. Actually, I think this is the first time I'm spotting this kind of style with that. But still, it's the design. In the Territory Titanium X, we tried out before, the color scheme they went for, it had, I think, white here and white leather on the seats. And let me tell you now, while white does look nice in the interior of a vehicle, it's a bitch to clean, because if you get any stain on it, you're not gonna enjoy it for very long. You really have to be OC with it to get, all the smudges out. With this, it's no problem. It's kind of got a dark gray with the blue stitching and then the blue accent leather. Same with the seats. It all matches really nicely, and whoever is doing the aesthetics at Ford's Interiors is doing a really good job. They even chose a nice kind of wood grain. Now, it's not going to be a real wood grain, of course, but it's textured. It's very nice. It seems very high quality. It's got a silver trim here, but one improvement from the previous one, and if you've owned one, you'll know, is that the AC vents, because in the old one it had like a little round vent, and it wasn't really like a perfect fit for this, so it's kind of loose. This one is, yeah, really nicely fit into the vehicle. It's a big improvement compared to before. So the steering wheel, Ford chose a flat bottom steering wheel. Again, guys with bellies like the flat bottom. It's very easy to get in and out. So that is also very sporty. It's got the tabs here. Yeah, it gives it a nice grip. You have cruise control on the left spoke. This is a normal cruise control, not the adaptive kind. You have buttons here on the right. And this is interesting because the way they did it, the Nokia Navi key back in the day? Well, it's kind of like this, because if you press this button, you can kind of choose between which screen you want to control with this side of the wheel. For example, you press this button, it says audio controls active. I can go volume up, volume down. On this, I can do all the kind of stuff. If I press it again, it says settings control active. I will end up controlling this. So right now, TPS, the TP Tire Information System, and they spell it the British way, TYRE, tire. Then you have auto start stop, trip computer 1 and 2. So yeah, it gives you all those functions. Let me see. Yeah, you can go through the cursors here, or the arrows here allow you to choose what you're playing around with: media, phone, driving info, vehicle status. Let's try that. Well, door is open, so that's to be expected. But yeah, it's a very different style, but something you can really get used to. The torque on the buttons is very nice. Same with the switches here. It's actually nice and minimalist. You have your ignition button there. But yeah, it's, in terms of controls, very nice. Pedals actually are nicely positioned as well. Now, this version might not have the panoramic glass roof, but not everyone likes a panoramic glass roof. I mean, what am I saying? A lot of people do like the panoramic glass roof, but up here you have your normal lights and stuff if you want to mess around with that. Sunglass holder there, auto dimming rear view mirror here. You have the vanity mirror with the light, the clip here for your RFID card. But what's really interesting here is actually the attention to detail, or at least with the way people use their cars. Because if you want to mount a dash cam, normally you'd put it here and then you'd run a wire up there, down there, like that. Very difficult. What Ford did, very well thought out. You can put a dash cam here and then you can wire it directly from the USB port right up here. Pretty cool. But what I really like is what Ford did with this center console over here. Now, the first thing you'll spot, you have your controls here for hazard. You have the panel for the AC, and this is actually a touch panel, and it's a haptic touch panel. So meaning when you press, let's say, the fan, you get a nice haptic feedback right there. So you know you actually press something. You also have the max and all that stuff. But when you press this, all the settings for the AC come up right there. So you can, let me try it again. So you can play around with it or adjust it accordingly to what you like. AC max, you have the recirculate right there. Dual, it's dual zone, by the way. So let's say you can adjust the temperature individually of each other, which is a good thing. Right below the panel here, you have a wireless charger, which is why my phone is right there. Again, this one has wireless CarPlay, wireless Android Auto, so that makes it very useful, and then it charges right there without you having to plug in. What I did find, though, is that my phone does get a bit warm, and sometimes when I pick it up, it's a bit warm, and then it says it's overheating because there's no cooling here. So maybe Ford can put a vent there to cool your phone as it charges. That's something I would do. If you want to charge the, I guess, old school way, there's a USB port under there. It's also a data USB port. There's also a USB-C port there, a 12-volt outlet. Again, this is a two-tier design, which is why I like it. There's also a compartment there for all kinds of stuff if you want to keep stuff there. There's also a USB port here in the back, so you can plug in if you're sitting in the back. So it's pretty well thought out when it comes to charging. So moving over here, this is actually a piano black panel. It looks nice, but what I did notice, and what you can see, I'm sure if you can see it right now, you'd also notice it too, it's got a lot of scratches on it already. Piano black surfaces and plastic, yeah, they tend to be scratch magnets, scuff magnets, and I can see it right here. Maybe Ford could improve on the material, but again, this probably was the unit that was displayed over at Mia's, so understandable. People would have been in and out of this car, so yeah, keep that in mind. You have the different drive modes of the vehicle. You have Eco Sport, Mountain. That's for when you're slightly off-roading. So it just optimizes the transmission to be able to give you traction when you need it. Hill descent control is here, the brightness here. You know, I actually wish I knew this sooner. I tried to adjust it. Anyways, but right over here, this I believe would be the bigger deal. This is actually your shifter. So it's a rotary shifter. It's a rotary E-shifter. And personally, I've never been a fan of these. I've experienced these in a lot of other brands. And while it does look straightforward, I mean, you have your P, all right, and then reverse, neutral, drive, and then you have here L, low range, which is, I find, unusual. And the reason is that I'm not a big fan of these because if you're doing a 3-point turn, it becomes all about kind of gross motor skills, especially if people are, honking at you to go faster. You could end up panicking and switch and flip to the wrong one. Versus if you have a T shifter or one of those gate type shifters, it's just easier, more intuitive. This one, it takes a bit of getting used to, so keep that in mind. Also, there are times that even I, driving from other vehicles, I tend to press this and think I went into park. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind there. This does take some getting used to, but once you're used to it, it should be no problem. Anything else to discuss? Big compartment here. You have a tray up there. You have glove compartment with stuff. So yeah, now let's go out and drive it. So I've had some time to get acclimatized to the new territory, and the first thing I can say is that the ride is definitely firmer than before. If I'm going over these bumps on A. Bonifacio going up to Skyway 3, it's a bit bumpier, but it's not anywhere near enough to be uncomfortable. This is actually just right, and of course, once you load the vehicle with people and cargo, extra weight, then it evens out very nicely. And now we're getting onto the nicer asphalt. It's super quiet. It's super smooth. Now when it comes to the noise, of course, actually not much coming into the cabin even in the city. The way it muffles most cars, most trucks is actually okay. Only the loudest motorcycles really bother me, and I can't really blame the territory for that because some of those motorcycles can be really loud. I don't know how to describe it. There's like a little tremble with the steering. Like when I move it a little bit, there's a little bit of tremble coming through there. I'm not sure if it's from the wheels or maybe the power steering itself, but there's a little bit there, especially in urban traffic, or at least in the city where the roads are a bit rougher. Maybe it's the feedback it's giving me, most likely, but I thought that was noteworthy. The other one is that the centering function of the steering is a bit more, say, not linear as other car companies. Like the way it feels when you're making a corner, it's like actively trying to straighten out the wheel. It feels a bit odd, but you get used to it. I did mention the E-shifter, the rotary shifter. Not a big fan of these kinds of systems, but again, once you get used to it, it's perfectly fine. But the one thing that's really noteworthy here is the behavior of the transmission, because the behavior of the transmission for a DCT is actually really good. That's something to keep in mind with this, because the territory, a DCT, it's never going to be as good. I've never encountered a DCT that is as good as a regular slush box automatic, meaning the kind of the fluid torque converter type of automatic. I've never encountered one that's as good as that for comfort, but this one comes pretty close, because a DCT, it operates by disengaging. Let's say you have all your even numbered gears on one clutch, like for example 2, 4, and 6, and then you have your odd numbered gears on the other clutch, which is 1, 3, 5, and 7. So what happens is, if you're going from, let's say, third gear to fourth, it's engaged in third gear, and then right when it shifts, it just swaps in right away onto the propeller shaft or the drive shaft or the transaxle of this one. So that's what it does, and it gives you super fast shifts, but it's also hard to actuate it in a way that is smooth. That's why the dry DCTs were never that good. I mean, Volkswagen did the DSG or Audi S-Tronic. Ford tried to do it with the power shift, and that didn't work out well, at least for a lot of customers. This is a much better transmission, especially in the city speeds, considering it's a DCT. Still not as good as a regular automatic, but still, considering it's a DCT, it's pretty good. In the city, most of my driving averages around 21 kilometers per hour. That's my daily commute. I was doing around 9.9. That's just me in the car, of course, but that's pretty good for something this big. I mean, of course, when you go for a big vehicle, once you put people inside, it's going to change. But still, it's a pretty good fuel economy figure I was getting out of this, and I was doing it quite handily. On the highway, doing much, much better, doing around 14.9. I'm sure I can get more, but again, I make it a point not to try to be as economical as possible. I try to get numbers that are, say, achievable easily by anyone. What I want to find out is, does the Territory have power? Let's see. Let's have it in normal mode now. Floor it. Takes a little while to respond. That's to be expected. It is a turbo. It is still a DCT. And, well, that being the turbo, you have the lag. And I showed you that when you have the longer piping you have from intake to turbo to intercooler to the actual intake, the more lag you will have. Let's try eco mode. Floor it. Yeah, it holds it back even more. So that's what it does. The eco mode, it just holds back the transmission a bit more, preventing you from, like accelerating too much and being, well, inefficient. Let's try sport mode. Let's see if it's a bit more relaxed. Let's go around and then floor it. That's a bit more eager, but still, this is not something for sport driving. I've driven Chinese cars that are great. I've driven Chinese cars that are really questionable. There's one that when I go over a hump at an angle, like when you go like that on a hump, it kind of twists the body. And the bad part is that you can hear it. That's the one thing you don't want to hear. You don't want to hear the body of a vehicle twisting, the plastic pieces rubbing. In this one, nothing. I'm not getting any of that. I'm getting it's just like a feel of quality with the way this is built. I have a feeling that when Ford and JMC were working on the Territory, they kind of made a wish list. A wish list of them internally, what they wanted to improve. And maybe they also talked to customers for the wish list of things they want to see in something like the Territory or Equator Sport. And I think they accomplished that, because this is something that you would really drive and enjoy every day. And they accomplished that in terms of the way it feels, the quality, the look, the features. And also, it feels, and you sit in it more like an SUV. And that, I think, is what we've been after all along out of these crossovers. You want the feeling of height, of elevation. And you get that with this. And you drive it around, you feel like you can cruise a bit more confidently. I mean, you won't be driving around in the off-roading in this one. You'd be doing this more in the city, more on the highway, using this every day as a practical everyday car. You just have more space, and it comes at a really good price. I mean, we'll talk about the price in a bit, but first, let's go back to the warehouse. To be honest with you, I went into this review with really a measured sense of skepticism about the Territory because I know Ford's tendencies. They like to offer more or try to one up everybody else with all the features, all the bells and whistles to try and offer you to get you to choose their products over others. And to be honest, it does put a strain to part suppliers because how do you offer more features for less money than your competitors like Toyota or Mitsubishi or whoever? And that does put a strain on the suppliers, and it results in some questionable reliability when it comes to certain components of the vehicle. That's what we saw before, but it doesn't seem to be the case with this new one. Driving it around, it does look great, it does feel great, it's more comfortable. The interior is very, very nice. No, I guess, cheap components. It doesn't feel cheap at all, which is a good thing. You want your interior to feel as high quality as possible, and I think they really achieve that. Also, the features inside, very reliable. When it comes to the Android Auto, I had no issues with electronics and all that. So, good job there, Ford and JMC with the Territory and the Equator Sport. Of course, time will tell how the DCT, the wet type DCT, will perform. Hopefully, they've learned a lot from the power shift experience. Now, when it comes to pricing, they're offering this for just over 1.3 million. And I know what you're gonna say, well, it's significantly more than the previous Titanium Plus. And that is true. But think about it this way. It's actually like moving into a bigger condo, a bigger apartment, or a bigger house. You feel the difference when you actually get inside, you experience the room, you experience the ride, and everything else I mentioned. It really is nice that Ford is offering this for the price like that because it's kind of in keeping with the original Henry Ford philosophy. He wants his people to be able to afford it, and I think quite a few of us can actually afford this. I mean, there are compact cars more expensive than this. This is Vince of AutoIndustriya.com. Thank you for watching. Watch out for a review of the Titanium X coming soon.